it rings funny to me when people, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, but when people are like, marketing does not put you over the top. We're getting Kyle Kuzma. What are we doing?
I'm not saying Kuzma puts you over the top, but I think Kuzma is kind of.
Kuzma.
It's kind of like the Giants. We're getting Shohei. Yes. Yes. Maybe Bellinger too. Oh, wait a second. Pause. Back to reality. Michael Conforto.
Well,
Jorge Soler.
Yeah, you messed up your off seasons there.
I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying?
They got Blake Snell. He's the biggest pitcher on the market. Was he not?
We're going for Stanton. We want Harper. You've got Yaz. And you've got Slater.
I would argue the Warriors' moves so far have felt very Farhanian. And I will even tell you that Larry Harris, he said to us.
I love Larry Harris.
I love Larry Harris. He said to us, he sat with us at the team store the day of the draft. And he said something that I was like, oof, good thing you don't work for the Giants. People would have lost their damn head. He said to us, he goes, look, if there's a home run out there, we're going to swing for it. But if not, we're going to try to improve on the margins. Oh, what did you just say? Improve on the margins? I mean, that is essentially what people have accused Farhan of doing the entire time.
That also sounds like the play-in game, and that it also sounds like, NBA middle ground.
Listen, I think
doesn't that sound like NBA middle ground?
It does,
where you never get the top pick and you never may win the title. I mean, that seems kind of what on the margins kind of does.
We live in the age of social media, so I understand that context years ago got thrown out the window, the top story of a tall building, and got smashed on the ground below and run over by 8 cars. So I get that there's no context, but don't you see that what the Warriors have done this offseason is exactly what the Giants have been accused of for 6 years? Now, we don't rip them for it because we understand. Like, you did a sign and trade for a player who wanted to leave and probably should leave, and so he did. And you wanted to get under the apron, and you wanted to try to get under the tax or at least start to save money a little bit. If some of the things that the Warriors had done, if they had been done with a different franchise, you'd rip them for it. Now, it's circumstantial. Again, I'm not saying you should, but the Warriors basically so far this offseason have done 2 things. Quote, improve on the margins and save money. It's not usually something you stand up as a fan and applaud.
No.
But it made sense right now. And we also don't know if there's another move coming.
And hopefully there is. Otherwise, they are, I think, kind of a net neutral situation. I mean,
that's probably fair.
That's the one thing I've been wanting to ask you, and I'm sure you covered this, but I didn't hear your show when you hit this.
You didn't.
There was a report last week that Joe Lacob reportedly led the Warriors' quote unquote cold negotiations with Klay Thompson. And when you had Steve Kerr saying, we are desperate to re-sign Klay. And you had Dunleavy saying basically the same thing. Oh, we are so desperate to re-sign Klay. We want Klay.
Did they use that
Klay.
word, by the way? I didn't hear desperate. I heard we really want Klay back. We need shooting, and that has been expressed to him.
I heard both guys say we're desperate to have Klay back.
Okay. I might be mistaken. I don't remember the word desperate, but anyway, go ahead.
But how do you make sense of that then? So do you believe that report that Lacob reportedly led the Warriors' quote-unquote cold negotiations with Klay and that maybe Steve and Mike maybe wanted Klay to return. Steph wanted Klay to return. Draymond wanted Klay to return. But that Joe, even though maybe publicly he might have said, hey, we'd love to have Bob Myers with us on draft night. Maybe he actually said that but didn't mean it. And maybe he didn't want Klay back. What do you think? I mean,
I don't think.
Do you make sense of that?
Yeah, I don't think it's that clear cut for multiple reasons. One being none of that takes into account what Klay wanted. And Klay, as has now been very, very well detailed, has been ticked off for 2 years. So did Klay want to be back? I know
because Wiggins and Poole got extended after the finals.
Well,
last time they won a championship and not him.
And not starting and not finishing and all of the things. The 4 closed-door meetings that he had with Steve Kerr, what were they about? Like, I don't know, something's not happy. You know what I mean?
I think what we know about that was late in the year, Steve said, hey, look, and I think Klay acknowledged it, that, hey, Steve kind of got through to him and told him, enjoy the twilight, enjoy the ride, because it's over before you realize.
Right, but I don't think that ever really landed. I know they said during the year, like Klay would have press conferences, be like, Steve told me this, and I figured it out, and that's what I'm going to try to do now. I'm going to enjoy it. But, I mean, this was 24 hours ago that Steve Kerr said this.
The difference for me as Klay's coach is, from 2014 to 19, pre-injury, Klay was unflappable. He rarely required much maintenance from me as a coach. He was just so happy playing at a high level. And, I would check in with him, and he was always fine and loving life. And that changed after the 2 injuries. He's struggled to try to get himself back to that level. And even though I think he played really well at times for us over the last few years, and obviously helped us win a championship in 22, you look at the numbers, even though this wasn't his best year, he still averaged 18 points and shot, I think, 39% from three, something like that. So, he's still a really high-level player. It's just in his own mind, and I think in the minds of everyone watching, he wasn't the same guy and as he was prior to the injuries, and Klay really struggled with that. And I think the stuff that went on organizationally, honestly, I think that stuff is all sort of just a byproduct of the frustration with the injuries. And we were always, in great stead with Klay in terms of our relationship and, communicating how we felt about him. But he, in the end, really needed this career change, and I think it's going to be good for him.
So I just think when I hear
Kerr,
that,
man, he's so honest.
When I hear that, I don't hear someone who, like, at the end of the year was like, yeah, man, I talked to Kerr and I need to enjoy it. No, dude, you never got there. You never felt okay.
Well, there was a lightness. Oh, go ahead.
No, Granny, what did you want to say about it?
So you guys are talking about whether or not the Warriors used the word desperate when talking about Klay. And I was going back through some old Kerr stuff trying to figure it out. I didn't find him using that word, not just yet, but I did stumble upon this, which was something he told you and Dibbs.
Yeah.
The couple of day after the season ended, the loss in Sacramento. This is April 17th. So his final appearance until yesterday on with you guys here on Willard and Dibbs. And he was asked if he's worried that Klay might not return to the Golden State Warriors. And at that point, again, right when the season ended, now almost 3 full months ago, here's what Steve Kerr said.
I'm really not. Of course, he has every right to do so. And one of the benefits of being a free agent is just the freedom that comes with it. And it'll be nice for Klay to have some options. And I think that's one of the things that freed him up a little bit. At the end of the year, it's just, not having the burden of anything going forward. Just, hey, play it out and let's see what happens this summer. And so he's in a good spot in that regard. But I know Klay really well. I know he loves it here. I know how much we all love him. I think he should be a Warrior for life, and I just think that he's still got some good years left in him. And but what we have to figure out organizationally is what does that look like on the floor. The business stuff will be taken care of. That stuff will be negotiated, all that stuff. But what does our team look like next year? We have to put the pieces together because I think Klay's a part of it, and I think Draymond and Steph, I think they should be Warriors for life, and that's not just a sentimental thought. We still need all three guys. They're all three still very good players, but it's just different now than it was 3-4 years ago. So we have to piece together the roster and see how we can improve.
I hear a coach saying what a coach needs to say to potentially keep a locker room and back his guys, and that's what you're going to say publicly going into negotiation. But I don't hear him say in there, damn it, Klay Thompson's going to be and needs to be a Warrior. He very much leaves open for the possibility. We've got to figure out what this looks like basketball-wise and whatnot. I don't know. That's an interesting answer.
The talk was that Klay was told that he was going to sit behind Podziemski. At least I read that in the last 10 days.
I think the Warriors wanted him to come off the bench, yes.
Yeah, so maybe that's a deal breaker. And also, it's interesting. I mean, this is a player who was such a light player as far as the room coming up and such a heavy player for them the last couple of years.
Agreed.
And you can kind of tell he was having a hard time coming to grips with the twilight of his career, and it was bothering him and weighing on him. I sat in for you or for Dibs with you last year on a Thursday when we had Kerr on. And I asked him, I said, would you ever consider moving Klay to the bench and bringing him off the bench? And Mark, I could not even get the question out. Now, granted, my questions are quite long. But I couldn't get the question out before he's like scoffing at it. Yeah. And it was not a scoffable question based on the performance, but he wanted to scoff at it because I'm sure he knew Klay Thompson could be driving around listening to the flagship station of the Warriors, and he hears me on here. He needs to hear me scoffing at the notion of coming off the bench. But if he, you know what I mean? So they were
he's got to back his guys.
They were organizationally tiptoeing around Klay Thompson.
I mean, really quick, as recently as late June, Steve Kerr did say, quote, "We desperately want Klay Thompson back."
Okay.
There you go.
All right. I don't think Dunleavy ever did.
No, Dunleavy definitely did.
But there you are on Steve. And I think you also just sort of mentioned one of the codes that is out there with Steve Kerr, because I can tell you this unequivocally. I remember the first 3 months of last season when everything was like, what's wrong with Wiggins? What's wrong with Wiggins? And he would come on here every week. Oh, my God, we believe in Andrew Wiggins. We are like, I am not worried about Wiggins in the slightest. Do you think that's what it sounded like in the pregame meetings on the coaching staff or when he's talking to Dunleavy or Lacob? I don't.
Steve keeps it together.
Yes, he's got to back his guys. When he's talking publicly, you have to back your guys.
Yeah.
But there has been, I can promise you, a bunch of Andrew Wiggins concern for more than a year now, dating at least all the way back to when he went away for a while at the end of the not last season, but the season before that. There's been a lot of concern about him. And yes, the reports are now all over the place that the team has been trying to trade him to anybody who will take him. But if we had asked him about Wiggins yesterday, he'd have backed him again.
Right.
And we did ask him about Wiggins with regard to why the organization kept him out of playing in the Olympics for Team Canada. And his answer again, in a way, was backing the player. He's like, look, Andrew Wiggins, this is, as you think about coming off of health and it's the offseason and what prepares us best for the season, this was the decision that we tried to make. In fact, here, instead of me paraphrasing it, here's what he said.
This is just, the decision that we made and based on, his health and his preparation for next year. And, these decisions are difficult, but, that was the route we wanted to go.
Let me translate. We might trade him and there's no way in hell we're letting him get hurt. You're not going to say that on the show.
Right.
Right? But, yeah, he's great at that.
Steve keeps it together. Steve keeps it together. That's his goal. But yeah, I mean, it's just when you start making when there needs to be an explanation for why players are playing and other players aren't playing, then when it's not readily apparent and to the fans who are in the stands, that's when you enter into a problem zone.
Yep. For
example, Luis Matos, National League Player of the Week, has a rough 10 days. All of a sudden, we're looking at Yaz and Slater and these nobodies. And those guys are, and Matos is back in the minors. Well, that didn't make a whole lot of sense for a team that wasn't really going anywhere. And now it's starting to make a little bit more sense. Now Slater's gone, and who knows where Yaz will go. They're starting to play their young guys. But when you watch the Warriors, there were times where you had to, if you didn't know the backstory, you'd be like, well, why is Moses Moody not playing? Why is Klay playing this much? And it's because Moses Moody is not won rings, and so he's just got to take whatever minutes we give him, and we're tiptoeing around Klay because Klay's having a hard time dealing with the twilight of his career. And so I'm glad. In fact, I'm glad that Klay moved on because, he can just be freed up to play basketball.
Yeah.
In Dallas, it will just be about basketball. It won't be about what you are opposed to what you were.
There you go.
It will just be about basketball.
Yeah, he doesn't have to hear it, and the fans won't even think about it. Dallas fans are not going to be worried about who Klay used to be.
What he was.
They don't care. They don't want him to even be their first or second best player.
Right.
They know that he's not.
And he'll start for them, but if by chance he has to come off the bench, it'll be easier for him to come off the bench there than here.
Let's go to Daniel in Livermore. Hi, Daniel. You're on with Willard and Krueger. What's up?
How's it going?
Good, man.
Thanks for
Good.
always putting on a good show, making our commute good. I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
I am curious. I don't know how long you guys stayed on this Farhan Warriors comparison, but I feel like I have to defend the Warriors a little bit here because I don't know when the last time the Giants landed a KD or even a Chris Paul or went all in on swings like that, and I really just feel like the Giants have no excuse when it comes to big signings. And I feel like the Warriors are dealing with, like, we have a superstar. We're dealing with how do we maximize this superstar's time frame but also not make ourselves irrelevant. I feel like the Giants don't even have a superstar right now. They've had shots.
Excuse me, the Giants have signed Aaron Rowand. The Giants,
my God, you went back 15 years.
The Giants have signed Mark Melanson. They've got their KD. Oh, no.
Well, Daniel, here's what I'd say. We didn't stick with it for long because it was kind of a circumstantial comparison. I think I'm with you. The situations couldn't be more different. But what I am pointing out is that because the circumstances are different, it shows the timing that is involved in certain things with certain organizations. The Warriors are doing something, and I think this is what I was trying to say. The Warriors are doing something that we accept because of who they are and because we understand this moment. If they were someone else, we would torch these moves. The Warriors have done two things this offseason. They've saved money and improved on the margins. That's what organizations get ripped for. But this is circumstantial, and in this moment, it somewhat, depending on your view and depending on what happens next, it makes a lot more sense. Plus, they play in a league with completely different rules with this new second apron, and if you blow that up, the penalties are so horrible that, in the NBA, we understand it a little bit better. But
there are common denominators here that both are going with middling-type veterans over younger players with higher upside. The only difference is the Warriors have won titles. Farhan's won nothing. He's won no titles.
That's correct.
And then you don't get as much of a wide berth when you haven't put up, when you haven't won championships and you haven't hung banners. I mean, it's just the way it is. Now, the Giants have, but Farhan hasn't. So, like if Sabian were still running the show, he'd probably have greater latitude from the fans than Farhan just because he authored those and constructed those championship teams. Farhan doesn't have that to lean on. So he's judged simply by what people see. And you know what? I like Matos. To me, the Giants are more fun to watch with Matos and Ramos and Luciano and the young guys with talent than they are watching Yaz and Flores and Slater.
I think everyone agrees. Everyone agrees with that.
But they might win a game or two more with the older guys.
Maybe.
But I'd rather watch Luciano, Matos, and Ramos.
I don't think the Warriors have been in the Giants' position much, if at all, in the last 15 years, where you're more than halfway through a season and you've got more losses than wins and all of that stuff. I'd also argue back, though, and again, it gets tough to do this because the sports are so different with the way they operate, but we act like Brian Sabian was always bringing in the top free agent. Like, how many times in the last generation of Giants baseball have they gone out, gotten the big fish of the offseason as a free agent and brought him in? Like Bonds.
Only half of Sabian's run did they even have the pocketbook to do that.
Exactly.
They didn't have the money in the 90s to go after big-time free agents. They signed Bonds and Bonds only.
And when they won 3 World Series, I would argue
a lot of homegrown guys.
Yeah, at no point did they have wow, that 40 home run bopper.
He made great trades.
Absolutely.
I mean, he traded Charlie Culberson for Marco Scutaro.
Yes.
And watched Scutaro become wasn't he the MVP of the LCS or something like that?
Did he win the MVP? He
might have won the MVP.
He had a bunch of base hits.
He traded for Kenny Lofton in July. The Giants scored in 2002. The Giants went from scoring 5 runs a game to 7 runs a game. They went to the World Series. So Sabian
traded Zach Wheeler for Carlos Beltran.
There's also that.
That was a disaster trade.
Everybody's got warts.
And that trade was a bad trade. I said it at the time because Buster Posey was out for the year. And you weren't winning any championships without Buster Posey.
Did he make the A.J. Brzezinski trade too?
He did.
There you go.
He did.
There's another one.
Joe Nathan and Francisco
And
Liriano.
Liriano.
And Booth
That's
Bonser
right.
for
Well,
AJ Pierzynski,
right.
who then kicked Stan Conti, the Giants trainer, in the balls in spring training. No, seriously, I called
Such a bad dude.
I called Ned Coletti
Oh my God.
at the time. And I just had him on the week before.
Kicked Stan Conti in the balls.
No, so what happened was the ball came up in dirt in a Cactus League game, ricocheted and hit AJ in the balls.
Okay.
And Conti came out to check on him, and he leans down. He said, "How does it feel?" And he might have giggled.
Yeah.
And AJ punched him in the sack in spring training. And Stan Conti's now doubled over.
Listen.
So I called Ned Coletti. I just talked to him the week before. This was one of their major moves. And I didn't know anything about this. Nothing, because it was a spring training game, wasn't on TV, wasn't on the radio. I said, "Hey, how's Pierzynski looking? I'm really excited to see Pierzynski." They just got him. He wasn't even in spring training for 2 weeks. He goes, "You know what? Brian and I don't care for his
What did he say?
disposition or something.
Yeah.
We don't care for his disposition, or we don't care for it." It was like something really. I'm like, "What? You just traded
three players
for this guy?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, his presentation." Brian and I are less than thrilled with his presentation. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, offensively, defensively. I'm like, I'm trying to. I'm like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
And then, he wouldn't tell me until like literally later in the year. He's like, "This is what happened."